I want to take a quick second at the beginning of the show to tell you guys that the Sleeper Wire Draft Genius Draft Kit is officially out. Go to sleeperwire.com/draft kit to order it for a low price of $29.99. And this is what you get in the kit. You get 2 different types of redraft rankings, IDP rankings, 3 different types of dynasty rankings, top 250 redraft players. You get a full strategy guide for redraft, dynasty, IDP, and dynasty startup. You have player profiles. You have draft day tools such as cheat sheets, auction values, and consistent sheet charts. Expert picks like sleepers, breakouts, busts, and ADP values. Season preview like strengths of schedule and coaching changes, and articles for all different types of leagues. Once again, sleeperwire.com/draft kit. Go get it. Help win your league.
I challenge you to a duel.
It's the only argument I need. I don't want to talk to you no more,
You got a lot of nerve.
Soon you will know what it is like to be defeated.
Stop defending him, Sean.
All right, let's go.
Hey, Sleepers, welcome to the Sleeper Wire Great Debate Show, where we do a fast debate between 2 players. I'm your host, Professor Chris, and with me today, back for the second time this season, is our Sleeper Wire prophet, Hoos. What's going on, man?
What is going on, Chris? How's it going?
It's going well, man. Getting all settled in my new place up here in Minnesota. It's looking nice.
Nice, man. I know you're ramping up a lot of stuff at this point of the season. You got school going back, you got football season, settling into your new digs. It's a lot going on for you.
Oh, yeah, man. It's exciting. I'll be happy to have it all done, though.
Yeah, for sure. Excited to get into another show.
Another show, yes. This is our, we have one more great debate after this before the season starts.
Oh, man.
I know.
Oh, man, oh, man.
I know.
It
Christmas
is here.
Day is almost here.
Yes. Yes. Exciting stuff.
All right, guys, before we jump into the show, please go to iTunes or Google Play or Stitcher or Podbean, wherever you listen to us, and drop us a nice 5-star rating and leave us a nice review. That helps out the show. What we're going to be doing is having an actual debate-style argument between 2 players. We're going to have a couple minutes to argue for our player, 90 seconds for a rebuttal, and then we wrap it up with final thoughts on our player. And a heads up, this is not for us to convince each other. I'm not trying to convince Hoos of my player. He's not trying to convince me of his. We're not trying to win the debate. That's not the point of this. The point of this is to give you guys legit arguments for and against them so you can make educated decisions on who to draft. And we're taking it back to running backs this week. We're doing Ajayi versus Alex Collins. I've got Ajayi and Hoos has Collins, and I'm going to go ahead and kick it off here. So longtime listeners of this show know that I have never been a Ajayi fan. Hoos knows that more than anybody. I didn't like him last year at all because I believed he was going to bust, and he certainly did based on his ridiculously high average draft position. And I'm going to go ahead and leave his 260 carry, 1,272 rushing yard, 8 touchdown 2016 season out of this argument. Last year, Ajayi played 7 games with the Miami Dolphins and 7 games with the Philadelphia Eagles. In the first half of the season with Miami, he rushed 138 times for 465 yards, averaging 20 carries per game. He had a pretty poor yards per carry at 3.4, but that Miami offensive line was pretty terrible. 20 carries per game is the benchmark for what you want your starting running backs to get in fantasy football. 20 carries per game is going to get you significant fantasy production. After getting traded to the Eagles halfway through the season, he was forced to split time with LeGarrette Blount, and Blount was the starter every single game. He was the bulldozer. He was the first and second down back, and Ajayi was forced down to about 10 carries a game on average. Blount rushed 173 times last season, but now he's on the Detroit Lions. That's, in theory, 173 carries that are missing and up for grabs. The vast majority of those are going to go to Ajayi. He's now the sole first and second down running back for the NFL champion Eagles team. Let's suppose Ajayi gets 150 of those carries. That would have put him at nearly 300 carries last season. He averaged 5.8 yards per carry with the Eagles. Now, I'm not a big believer in the yards per carry stat. I believe it's more of an offensive line stat than a running back stat. But guess which team has the best offensive line in the NFL? That's right, it's the Philadelphia Eagles. They finished last season as the #1 offensive line according to Pro Football Focus, and they're once again projected to be the #1 offensive line in 2018. Even if Alshon Jeffrey has to begin the season on the PUP this year, teams still aren't going to be able to stack the box every play either. Carson Wentz is a very talented quarterback. Nelson Aguilar is primed to break out this season, and he looked good at points last season. Mike Wallace is an upgrade over Torrey Smith to stretch the field. Matt Collins has a chance to step up at wide receiver in his sophomore season. And of course, they have one of the best tight ends in the game in Zach Ertz. Missing 6 games of Alshon isn't going to slow the offense down a whole lot. I mentioned earlier about how 20 carries per game is going to get you significant fantasy production. If Ajayi gets 20 carries at 5.8 yards per carry, that... All right, Hoos, let's hear that rebuttal against Jay Ajayi.
Oh man, this is quite the flip around from last year, right? I mean, I was arguing for Jay Ajayi last year with the ridiculous ADP. And yeah, I mean, he has a decent one this year. That's not my problem. The problem with the, Jay Ajayi fantasy owners, if you're looking to own him, it's the fact that, there's always constant, competition in that backfield. Not to mention there's Doug Peterson there. He's kind of tough coach to trust. He's kind of like one of those Bill Belichick coaches where you don't really know how he's going to be used. I think he will be used. I think he's going to be a fine back. I just think he's going to be, struggle to hold even RB2 status all season. And, couple that, he's got the chronic knee problems. Then you got Sproles, you got Donnell Pumphrey. He has competition. It's not that he doesn't. He has guys that they do like, there. So, I mean, got Corey Clement, that's going to play a role. These guys are, all the talented guy. It's a talented team, and yeah, this is probably one of the most, prolific offenses in the league. But my thing is just when can you trust them? When are you going to roll them out? Other than it being, a great, he has a great matchup. But even then, the game script could change. They could be wanting to do different things.
All right, let's take it over to Alex Collins. Hoos, kick it off.
Alex Collins. Loved me some Alex Collins. Loved him since last year. He was drafted by the Seahawks in the 5th round in 2016. He was the 13th back off the board. But, I mean, he was projected to go as high as the 2nd round from a few scouts and ranked as the 5th best back in the draft. So, he faces some adversity. He had, Seahawks drafted 3 guys with pro size. I think there was another guy there they drafted. And then, they had Eddie Lacy. And so there was so many guys there. And, since Seattle is so bad at evaluating names, that's not Marshawn Lynch. They waived Collins on September 2nd, 2017. So, I love these guys with a chip on their shoulder. So he goes to Baltimore. No Baltimore running back has gained over 900 yards rushing in consecutive years since Ray Rice in 2011, 2012. Collins is going to do that this year. They have 4 different leading rushers in the past 5 years. They need stability, and Collins will give them that. He was ranked 11th in the league last year with 973 yards. And even though he only started, on this practice squad, he didn't even start, a game until, week 4, where he got his first start. He also had 6 touchdowns on the ground. He holds a 81% catch rate since entering the league, 34 balls for 271 yards. The guy can do it all. He's not the fastest back, but he just always rips long gains. He had a 50-yard scamper, a couple that long with 34 yards, a 43-yard scamper. The guy just does it all. He always does it at least twice a game. He had a 4.7 yards per carry and 2.1 yards after after contact. So he had 4 fumbles last year, but so did Todd Gurley. But Todd Gurley had 5, and nobody's telling you not to draft Todd Gurley. So I mean, there are many backs that you can trust in the workhorse role. He's going to see close to 300 touches. He saw 237 last year in limited actions, 1,210 total yards. Harbaugh loves him. He said he's already proven the fact that he can be a good complete back in this league. Now, they did say that they were going to add upgrades to the offense, but they didn't add any at running.
All right, so while the Eagles have the best offensive line this season, The Ravens are way down on the list at number 24, according to Pro Football Focus. Without Marshall Yanda last year, their offensive line was awful. Well, he's 34 years old this season, and there's no guarantee that he's going to be back to form. The Ravens also seriously upgraded their wide receiver core this year. It was horrible last season. They're going into the season with Michael Crabtree, John Brown, and Willie Snead, with Nick Boyle and Hayden Hurst at tight end. Flacco is only a season removed from throwing the second most pass attempts in the NFL as well, only one fewer than Drew Brees back in 2016. Without Yanda, he turned into a checkdown guy who went from 672 pass attempts down to 549. 123 fewer passing attempts due to not having Yanda or any decent receiving options. It's highly possible that the Ravens throw the ball a whole lot more this season, which is going to hurt Collins. He's not, as good as Buck Allen in the receiving game. They're also most likely going to be a mediocre team, not winning a lot of games. They're going to be forced to throw. The argument against Collins for me isn't necessarily against the player, it's the situation. All right, so moving into final thoughts here, I'm going to take it back to Jay Ajayi. I mentioned earlier about how 20 carries per game is going to get you significant production. If Ajayi gets 20 carries at his 5.8 yards per carry that he had last year with the Eagles, that's 116 yards per game, which puts him at 1,856 rushing yards at the end of the season. Yes, that sounds ridiculous, and it probably is. Let's be more conservative here. Instead of 20 carries a game at 5.8, let's say 15 carries at 4.5 yards per carry. That's 1,080 yards at the end of the season, which would have been 8th best in the NFL last season. Let's bump that down again. Let's say 13 carries per game at 4 yards per carry. That's 768 yards at the end of the season. That would have been 20th last season in rushing yards. Those stats sound pretty bad. I mean, that puts him right around Bilal Powell and Orleans Darkwa in rushing yards, but Jay Ajayi is going to get more than 13 carries per game. And with this Eagles offensive line, he's most likely going to have more than 4 yards per carry. In fact, his average for his career is 4.5 yards per carry. I think the 15 carries per game at 4.5 yards per carry is much more indicative of where he's going to be at the end of the season, making him a 1,000-yard rusher this year. He's currently going in the middle of the 4th round as the 20th running back off the board. So if you're looking for a guy who's in a good situation who can absolutely outperform his average draft position, it's Jay Ajayi.
All right, going back into my guy Alex Collins. Yeah, you mentioned the additions they've made, but I think that's going to help them. I mean, I think it's going to help them a lot. They were able to stack the box, last year, and even though Alex Collins saw so many stack box, he was still able to have a 2.1 yards after contact. So I mean, the guy. He's going to see less this year, just because I think that they've added, they've got Hayden Hurst, they got John Brown, Michael Crabtree. That's all going to help, and I think, now with no Danny Woodhead saw over 40 targets last year, and his limited, times that we did see him when he was healthy. Yeah, they're going to spread that out to Buck Allen, but they are going to spread that out to Alex Collins as well. They mentioned that they want to get him the ball more. He's proven that he can, be a good pass catcher out of the backfield. I mentioned that 81% catch rate. Yeah, I mean, he's going right, towards the end of the 5th round. In some drafts, I've seen him go as high as round 2, and some drafts as well. I'm not advocating you take him in the round 2, but somewhere around 4 or 5 or so. Now he might not last that long, given that there are not that many workhorse backs. But again, he's a workhorse back. He's somebody you can count on. And Alex Collins, yeah, he's gonna, he's got that RB2 potential, but not 2 potential. People are drafting him like that, but I think he definitely has RB1 upside. And given that draft position, you could load up on other positions and start off. I'd be fine with him. And as disgusting as it sounds afterwards, grabbing a Lamar Miller afterwards, and having those 2 guys and maybe a couple upside guys later on in the draft. And just loading the rest of my team up. So yeah, give me Alex Collins at that draft position and what he can potentially do this year. Seeing close to 300 carries, really excited about it.
All right, that's going to wrap it up for this week's episode of the Sleeper Wire Great Debate Show. Couple final things before we go here. Please go to patreon.com/sleeperwire and become a patron, subscribe to the show on there, help out the show. There's a lot of cool stuff that you can get in return for doing that. Sleeper mug, Sleeper t-shirt, early access to the Sunday Blitz. You get priority questions answered on the Wednesday Mail Sack show. A lot of stuff that you can get over there. Go to our new website, sleeperwire.com, totally revamped it, and sleeperwire.com/draftkit as well, as I mentioned at the beginning of the show. Follow us on Twitter at Sleeperwire Show. I'm on there at Seymour Sleeperwire. Hoos is on there at Sleeperwire Hoos. You can find us on Sleeperbot at Professor Chris and Prophet Hoos, and the Fantasy Life at Professor Chris and Hoos the Prophet. Thanks for listening, guys. We'll catch you next time.